Buongiorno, thank you for joining me. Where are we this time? Last time we were hiking through the woods. That was a really great trip to see Castel Vecchio in Tuscany. And this time we are on the other side of Italy, almost directly due east, south of Bologna. Southeast of Bologna, we are in a town called Ravenna. Now, I didn't even know about this town until a few months ago. Maybe you've never heard of it too. But I was reading this book, The History of the Popes, and in succession, in the period right after the fall of the Roman Empire, these two popes were exiled here. And so it caught my attention. I said, I have to go there. I have to see what else is in that city. And it turns out, as I read more about Ravenna, my desire to come here grew even more. So this was the first thing I wanted to do after shooting that last video, but I've been very busy with life and work and everything else that seems to pop up and keep me from getting out the front door. And I finally made it to Ravenna last night. I have 3 days here, and there is so much to see. Dante is buried here. Two popes were exiled here. What makes this city very famous, though, is its mosaics. Ravenna was really the center of Christianity after the fall of the Roman Empire. Odoacer, the king of the barbarians, he was murdered by an Arian king called Theodoric, who was the king of the Ostrogoths. The king of the Ostrogoths became the king of Italy. His name was Theodoric. He's buried here in a big mausoleum. The thing to know about Theodoric is that he thought he had the power to elect popes. And so a lot of the Christian influence for the next couple hundred years came right out of Ravenna, where Theodoric ruled. He was eventually overcome by the Byzantines. And this is really where the modern popularity of Ravenna comes from, because it was home to 8 UNESCO World Heritage Sites now. And what's in each of those sites are these Byzantine mosaics. They're the most well-preserved in the world. One of them is supposed to span the entire ceiling of this little chapel, and it's supposed to contain 700 golden stars. I can't wait to see it. I'm really hoping I get some good angles for you guys to enjoy it as well. So I'm going to take you through the town. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some of those things that I just highlighted, and I'm really excited, so stay tuned.
Ravenna is just east of Bologna on the Adriatic coast of Italy, and it's full of history. But you might not imagine such history when you take your first look. It's filled with modern architecture, and the churches are in such excellent condition that you would guess that they were built only 500 years ago. But Ravenna's gems are over 1,600 years old. Popes died here, emperors gathered troops here, and post-Roman kings ruled Italy from Ravenna. Eventually, the Byzantines took control and gave the city its lasting monuments to the Catholic faith. Our first stop is the Basilica of SANT'FRANCESCO, built in the 9th century over an older 5th century church that converted a Roman bath. It was later dedicated to the founder of the famous Franciscan order in the 13th century. 100 years later, in the 14th century, the famous poet of the Divine Comedy, Dante, had a funeral for his burial here. Today, the basilica enjoys a famously simple interior. The most fascinating thing about this church is that the crypt is continually and purposely submerged underwater without damaging the structure. Dante's tomb is right outside. Nearby is Ravenna Cathedral, which was originally built in the 5th century, but after major deterioration, it was rebuilt in the 17th century with a brand new facade. Beside the cathedral is the Neonian Baptistery, built and named after Bishop Neon of Ravenna. Inside are a number of chapels. One in particular is dedicated to Our Lady of the Sweat, a story about a miracle in which the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary began to sweat blood. But the most famous site of this entire historic basilica is the Chapel of St. Andrew. Erected in 495 by the Ostrogothic king Theodoric, it was a private chapel for bishops, the only one of its kind and the oldest surviving archiepiscopal chapel in the entire world. After Theodoric, who was an Arian, had died, the artist wanted to create a truly Christological and clearly anti-Arian glorification of Christ. Visitors are left with less else to think about. In the cathedral's museum are also historical artifacts from the archdiocese, including a paschal calendar used for liturgical calendar dates, the bishop's chair from the 5th century, and relics of the thorns of Jesus' crown. The Neonian Baptistery is right next door. Built in the 4th century by Bishop Neon, it contains Byzantine mosaics dated from the 5th century. Once again, the artists wanted to show their theological triumph over the Arians by emphasizing the glory of Christ. Sant'Apollinare Nuovo was built at the command of the Arian king Theodoric and has maintained much of its original shape. Characteristic of the Byzantines, their mosaics span the entire aisle of both sides' nave. One side represents the procession of women coming to the Madonna, and the other side represents the martyred saints, each wearing the white and approaching Christ. On the other side of the city is the Basilica of Saint Vitale, a saint that we know little about. He is said to be a Roman soldier who converted to Christ and was martyred. The structure takes on the traditional octagonal Byzantine style after Bishop Ecclesio accompanied Pope John I to Constantinople in the year 525. That Pope John was exiled by Theodoric to Ravenna shortly after, where he died of maltreatment. Near the basilica is the mausoleum of Galla Pladicia. Galla Pladicia was a Roman cohort and regent, and she was queen to both a Visigoth king and an Ostrogothic king. Because of this, her influence on 6th century Christianity is unmistakable. For all she did for the spirituality of Ravenna, a mausoleum was built, but she was never buried in it. Still, it is a beautiful monument, and the level of detail in the blue and gold starlit ceiling is iconic of the history and strong Catholic identity alive in Ravenna today. The inside of the Basilica of Saint Vitale is something to behold. Enormous mosaics depicting the New and Old Testament stories, the vast size of this project commands the attention and reverence of everybody who enters the doors. A couple miles outside of town is Saint Apollinare in Classe. It was built on the burial site of Saint Apollinare, who came here at the end of the 1st century from Antioch to set up a Christian community. With some renovations, it represents the purest form of an ancient basilica, and its interior is considered the best preserved church of the ancient world. The mosaics surrounding and above the altar is incredible. Saint Apollinare stands in a field, while above him the Transfiguration of Christ is depicted. This is among the most unique depictions of the Transfiguration in the ancient world, where Christ's face is at the center of a beautifully bejeweled cross. Ravenna is beautifully historic, and each of its incredibly preserved mosaics is a testament to the lasting faith still present among the residents and pilgrims today.